In the heart of the ancient world, where empires rose through conquest and fell through blood, one truth remained unchanged: spectacle was power. Kings did not rule with swords alone, but with fear crafted for the eyes of thousands. Before the crowds roared and the arenas trembled, the stage was set with rituals older than the empires themselves. Warriors, slaves, and beasts were not simply combatants, they were offerings to a throne desperate to prove its strength. This is where the line between justice and brutality vanished, where entertainment became a weapon, and where the legacy of a kingdom was written not in ink, but in flesh. Welcome to the beginning of an age defined by terror, dominance, and the relentless hunger of the crowd. In ancient Persia, loyalty was not declared with words, it was proven with blood. Every warrior entering the king's service stepped into a world where devotion demanded sacrifice, and hesitation meant death. Rituals of allegiance were crafted to break fear, crush doubt, and forge soldiers who obeyed without question. Before battles began, before blades clashed, these men offered their strength, their pain, and sometimes their lives to the throne they swore to protect. For the king, these ceremonies were more than tradition, they were instruments of control. Through them, he measured courage, eliminated weakness, and reminded his army that betrayal carried a price no traitor could afford. In this chapter, we descend into the brutal rituals that bound warriors to their ruler, and ensured that the king's shadow reached every heart on the battlefield. In ancient Persia, truth was not discovered through words, it was dragged from the soul through suffering. When loyalty wavered or suspicion rose, the empire turned to trials that pushed the human spirit to its breaking point. Fire, steel, and isolation became instruments of judgment, each designed to reveal the courage or corruption hidden within a man's heart. These rituals were not mere punishments, they were spectacles of fear, ensuring that every soldier, every commander, and every whisper in the palace knew the cost of deceit. Some emerged purified, scarred yet alive. Others vanished into the silence of the mountains, condemned by the flames they failed to endure. In this chapter, we step into the terrifying world of Persian truth-seeking, where survival meant innocence, and failure meant being erased forever. Across the vast Persian Empire, the land itself became a weapon of fear. Hills, border ridges, and isolated passes were transformed into grim monuments, places where the remains of rebels and defeated enemies were displayed as warnings carved into the earth. Every traveler, every merchant, every soldier passing these slopes understood the message: defiance had only one destination. These hills were not battlefields, they were the empire's silent storytellers, guardians of a terror that stretched farther than any army could march. The wind carried the echoes of those who fell, and their presence shaped the geography into a landscape ruled by obedience. In this chapter, we explore how Persia used the land to enforce power, turning nature itself into a witness to its brutal legacy. In the heart of the Persian Empire, symbols were not mere decorations, they were living forces, crafted to command loyalty, ignite terror, and remind every warrior of the divine power behind the throne. Before armies marched, priests and commanders prepared sacred standards said to hold the spirit of the empire itself. These banners were not carried by ordinary soldiers, they were guarded by elite warriors who understood that losing one meant more than defeat, it meant dishonor that could stain an entire bloodline. Some banners were believed to bless the ground they touched, while others were said to curse the enemies who dared face them. Their presence on the battlefield transformed ordinary men into zealots driven by devotion, fear, or fate. Warriors marched beneath wings of gold, symbols shaped as lions, sunbursts, and guardian spirits. To the Persians, these were not objects, they were protectors, witnesses, and silent judges. But the power of symbols stretched far beyond battle. In ceremonies deep within the royal courts, chosen soldiers stood as living banners, adorned in sacred armor and markings. They were trained to embody the virtues of the empire: strength, loyalty, and unbreakable resolve. Their stillness carried more weight than speeches, their presence more force than any command. To look upon them was to be reminded of the king's authority and the divine order shaping the empire's destiny. These symbols, etched in gold, carved in stone, woven in crimson and black, held the empire together through fear and reverence. They shaped the identity of its warriors and defined the rituals that bound them to their king. In this chapter, we uncover the world where symbols became power, and where power became sacred. In the Persian Empire, victory did not always bring celebration. Sometimes, it unleashed a wrath more feared than any enemy. The king's anger was not wild or uncontrolled. It was deliberate, measured, and precise, like a blade guided by centuries of royal authority. When a province rebelled, when a general faltered, or when loyalty wavered even for a heartbeat, the consequences echoed across the empire. The king did not punish to satisfy emotion, he punished to restore order. His wrath was a message carried by riders, carved into stone, whispered in the darkest corners of military camps. Entire units who failed their vows were stripped of honor and thrust into impossible missions, condemned to earn redemption through blood. Commanders who betrayed their oaths faced judgment in rituals meant to expose their souls before the empire stripped them of everything they had once commanded. Sometimes his anger fell not on soldiers, but on governors and noble families whose ambition threatened the balance of power. Their estates burned under the desert sun, their banners torn down, their names erased from official records. To lose royal favor was to lose identity itself. Yet the king's wrath was not only destruction, it was also discipline. It forged an army that obeyed without hesitation, an empire that understood stability required sacrifice. Even the bravest generals spoke carefully in his presence, aware that one misstep could shift their fate from honored advisor to condemned traitor. In this chapter, we step into the shadow of Persia's most feared force, a wrath that shaped nations, silenced rebellions, and reminded millions that the king's authority flowed like a river, calm when respected, devastating when challenged. As the Persian Empire expanded across continents, its power seemed unshakable, but even the greatest empires carry shadows that stretch far beyond their victories. Behind the shining armor, behind the sacred banners, behind the rituals carved into the memory of generations, lingering doubt grew like a silent flame. Warriors who once marched with unbreakable faith began to question the price of loyalty, and the king himself faced a truth no ruler could escape: power may command the body, but it is fear that commands the soul. For every triumph written on tablets of gold, there were stories unrecorded, families torn apart, soldiers who vanished in distant lands, young men shaped not by choice but by the iron traditions of war. These unseen sacrifices formed the hidden foundation of the empire. They were the quiet voices that whispered behind the grand halls, reminding leaders that glory always demands someone's suffering. Yet the shadow of Persia did not end with the men who fought under its banners. It stretched across centuries, influencing kingdoms that followed, shaping military traditions, and inspiring legends of honor, brutality, and divine rule. The rituals that once terrified armies became lessons studied by historians, scholars, and warriors who sought to understand how fear could shape an entire civilization. And as the empire aged, doubt became its silent companion. Not a weakness, but a reflection of the weight carried by those who enforced its laws and bled for its borders. The legacy left behind was not merely carved in stone monuments or royal archives, it was etched into the human spirit, a reminder that even the most powerful empires walk a path lined with questions, shadows, and the memories of those who paid the ultimate price. In this final chapter, we look upon Persia not as a conqueror, but as a force shaped by sacrifice, strengthened by devotion, and haunted by the echoes of its own long shadow.